Welcome to another program of EriXpress Media. Our guest today is Adel Andemeskel. I'll let her introduce herself first, and then we'll go with the discussion. So Adel, would you please introduce yourself?
Okay. Hi, my name is Adel Andemeskel. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, and I'm a medical student.
Well, let's start with your name. What does Adel mean?
Oh, Adel. So Adel is actually, it comes from a word that means a branch off of the ater tree. This is coming from my dad. He's the one that named me. So he named me that because I was the firstborn in the family. And so I was the first branch of the family tree, the ater tree. So that's where my name comes from.
Have you heard a lot of people tell you what does it mean, or ask you, or because they might think is it Eden? Because when I talked to you when you came to Stanford, so you'll tell us a little background. So some people say, Adel, what does it mean? So it's a very, very nice name. I really like it. So, well, it's more than that, right? That you're born in Boston and raised there, and you're a medical student. I think there got to be more to the story than that, right?
Yes. Well, yeah. So a lot of people ask me about my name from both the American side and the Eritrean side, because the American side, asks me if I'm this, named after the singer Adele. And then I tell them, no, it's actually pronounced Adel, and this is, what it means. And then on the Eritrean side, a lot of times people ask if I'm actually named after the mountain Adal. And then I have to, correct them again that it's Adel. And so, yes, it's very unique. I haven't met another person. I've met other people named Adel, but not with the same meaning. So it's been pretty unique to me. I find it pretty special.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah.
And as far as more to the story, yes. So I was born in Boston and raised in Boston as well. And I went to college, actually, all the way across the country, all the way across the US and California. I went to Stanford University, and that's where I met you, Isaiah. And I finished my bachelor's degree in Boston, in biology, in 2017. And so after I graduated, I went back home to Boston, where I spent 3 years working as a research assistant at Brigham and Women's Hospital. And during that time, I applied to medical school and started medical school my first year in 2020, fall of 2020. And that's where I am now.
Yeah, wonderful. So before we go to where you are right now, when you were at Stanford, I invited you, Luam, Eden, Sarah, and Abraham to come and talk to the Tigrinya students, the adult Tigrinya school students in San Jose. And then the reason I did that was for you to talk to them about, encouraging them to go to high school, or, strategies for them to think to go to universities, apply to universities, and stuff like that. And then one thing that really stuck out to me, even today, is that I think it was you, but almost all of you, was that when you were in high school, finishing up in high school, you went for 6-8 weeks to like a camp before you would go to college. And you mentioned that, having that freedom before you go to college is very, very important. And that really, I think all of you said, and each of you came from different places. You're from Boston, Aiden from Atlanta, Luan from Maryland, and Sarah from New Jersey. So, I mean, we all had somebody, like that kind of experience was important. So would you mind going over that again for our listeners, for the younger ones? What did you, I mean, I'm paraphrasing it, but I think that got a lot of attention because you were talking to the parents too, because the parents were there too. So would you mind retailing that story?
Sure. And I hope I'm making the right connection. I went to a summer camp one summer, and then I also did a program at MIT. Do you remember which one you?
You mentioned MIT at that time.
Okay. So I'll talk about the program I did at MIT, which is a great program, and the more people who are aware of it, the better. So that's good. It's called MITES. I think the acronym is Minority Introduction to Math, Engineering, and Science. And it's a free summer program at MIT for minority students going into your senior year of high school. And there you take classes with a group of other students all together in math, engineering, science, life sciences as well. And you also get to, have some mentorship and also just time away with other students like you. And it was a great opportunity for me. I met a lot of people all across the country and Puerto Rico even through that program. And we all were very, we were similar in that we were all minority students, but we were motivated and we wanted to succeed. And I'm still friends with those students today. Even I just finished chatting with one of them a couple of days ago after he had his birthday. So, and it is true. I think one of the only people in my Eritrean community who did something like that. It's not really, I guess, not really common, maybe. But I think it was really a great chance to gain a bit of independence and also to keep my motivation going into school. So I really recommend it. I think, what I do remember from the program or from the talk or the talk that we had at the Adel teaching school was that a lot of parents are, a little bit worried. And it's also not in our culture a lot of the times to have children go far away for an extended amount of time. To let
go, right? To let go.
Exactly.
Hard to let go. Yeah.
It's very hard to let go. And, even I didn't grow up in Eritrea, but from hearing about growing up there, it's, it's not heard of to leave the house. But I think when you come to the US, with these opportunities, it's almost, to me, like the pros of what comes out of those programs really outweigh, those hesitations. I think and it also is a great way for the kids to show their parents that they'll be okay leaving the home. So I really recommend those programs. So this one is called MITES at MIT. Of course, with the COVID pandemic, I'm not sure how they're doing it now, but in the future, hopefully when they open back up, it's in a completely free program in the summer. They even help with travel if you need it. So I would highly recommend it to anybody who's interested.
Yeah, I think that's a very great recommendation. And I think there are other programs, but for the ones you went to, the one in MIT, at MIT, remember the requirements? For example, what were the requirements?
It is a very competitive program. They do want to see your grades, and they do want to they do want you to have recommendations, a lot of recommendations and personal statements. But like you said, there are definitely other programs around that do similar, that have a similar mission and structure. So it's not, it's not just this one or nothing. And it's also, for me, when it comes to being a competitive program, I don't say that to scare, I say that to prepare, because I always think, you should always try, like I said, this program is free. The application, I'm pretty sure, was free last time I saw. So, it's more of a why not? You should try it. And then the worst they can tell you is no. And then you just go to the next program, but it shouldn't scare you off from even trying. And it's to prepare you to make sure that you do, put a lot of effort into your application, that it is a competitive program.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And also another thing that you raised at the talk was that you were advising, I guess, the parents that let the kids decide what they want to study, right? Instead of as parents saying, okay, you need to study this and that. Do you remember saying that, or?
Yes, I don't think I ever told you this, but there was once a conversation with a parent, with a child and her father, that has been stuck in my head, and I even talked about it in my essays when I was applying to medical school, because it was
really? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the Tigrinya school?
Yes,
oh,
the
Tigrinya school. I don't think you told me.
No, I don't know if I told you, but
okay.
But it was
so
actually an essay, and I wrote it to this school, so it got really.
Okay.
And it's because it was so impactful for me. So I'm glad I'm telling you now. So I can talk a little bit. So it was a child. Unfortunately I forgot her name, but she was 10 years old at that time, and she was talking about, or she asked a question. And the first thing that struck me about this girl was that she was so eloquent. She spoke so well for herself, even at 10 years old. And she was telling us about how she wanted to be a journalist. And she told us she writes every day and she loves writing and she wanted to be a journalist. However, her parents, her dad, didn't want her to be a journalist. He wanted her to go into medicine, engineering. And she said, she asked the question so well, and I might be mistaking it or not saying it as well as she did, but she basically asked, what do you do if your goals don't agree with your parents' goals? And it was a very, very good question. And I remember it struck a bit of a debate. And I think another parent chimed in, because I started to, at first I was a little, at first I was like, oh, you should do whatever you want to do. I was very passionate about that statement. But another parent chimed in and she explained where her dad possibly was coming from, the child's dad, and made a very good point in that, when we're coming from Eritrea, coming from a place like Eritrea, being a doctor, being an engineer, being a lawyer means security, right? It means safety. It means you will be okay. And so the child's father, that's his intention, right? His intention is, I want my daughter. Exactly. I want my daughter to be okay. I want her to be secure, safe. And so that's why I'm saying being a doctor, a lawyer, engineer. And that brought me back, and I was like, okay, this makes sense, but on the other hand, in the US, I guess what I tried to say was that you as a parent gave your child, the best gift, right? The gift of opportunity in the US. And because we're here, because you guys came here, your children, us, we are able to do a lot more than if, than you guys were able to, for example. And so being a writer, actually, you can be safe in the US is what I was trying to convey, is that we have this, you guys gave us this great opportunity to be safe in more ways than possible in other places. And so in the end, I gave the advice to the child to keep talking to her dad about being a writer, what it means to be a writer here in the US, show him that, she will be okay, she will be safe. And as long as they keep talking to each other and keep communicating, things will turn out okay for her, is what I kind of tried to convey. So, and that always stuck with me, that conversation. So.
Oh wow, that's pretty good. So it helps you to also put your thoughts together and to apply to medical school and stuff like that. Okay.
Good.
Well, after you graduated from Stanford, where did you said you were 3 years worked, and also you wrote an article at that time, right? Scientific article.
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us about that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so I graduated with a degree in biology. I've always loved life sciences. I've always also loved asking questions. And so after graduating, well, I should say before I graduated, the summer before my senior year of college, I did a internship at Brigham and Women's in the rheumatology department, doing research there as well on a different research team. And then I graduated, and when I graduated, I told them that I would be I would love to work with them, and they were able to find me an opening position. So I say that because I wanted to show that internships are important. If you can't have them, it might be a good way to get jobs. Just wanted to put that in there. But then I graduated and I worked there, and I worked in the rheumatology department on a study that looked at, that was an observational study. So I basically interviewed patients with rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune disease, and talked about, what medications they were taking, what exercise they were doing, what they were eating, things like that. And we, interview them every year for at least 5 years. And then we put it in a database, and other doctors, other investigators could use that data to ask different questions. So I did that. And so my article, I wrote an abstract about omega-3s. So a lot of the rheumatoid arthritis patients will take different supplements that may or may not help their disease. And so I focused on omega-3s, so things like fish oil, DHA, because about 40% of our participants were taking omega-3s. And I wanted to see if it was actually helping them. So I wanted to see, I couldn't do a trial, but I just looked at the data that we've been collecting for the past, I think at that point it was about 15 years, and looked at if patients who took omega-3s, if them taking it was associated with a better disease outcome. So if their joints were less painful, if they were less swollen, if their overall activity of their disease was a little bit better. So I looked at that and found that that taking omega-3s was associated with better outcomes, better disease outcomes. It doesn't mean that it's a causative effect, right? So it doesn't mean that when you take it, it will definitely help you, but it did show that it might be good to look into what omega-3s are doing, because 40% of patients were taking it. So it means a significant amount of patients are taking the omega-3s. And then you have this association, and not a lot of research has been done with these types of supplementation. So that was, my conclusion was that more studies should be done, and in a more trial, maybe, or more causative, cause and effect style of study as well.
So you turned in that article to be peer reviewed, and what journal was it? Did you?
I was submitted in the American College of Rheumatology in their conference, their annual conference. And so I actually was granted, it was accepted, and then I also was able to present it through an oral presentation during the 2019 annual conference in Atlanta.
Okay, because you sent me the article and I read it. So the other, a couple of things. What traditional Eritrean foods are rich in omega-3? Have you done any, or?
I haven't actually. That would be a good question. Well, what is rich in omega-3s is fish, right? So at least I remember I would eat asa tibs, asa akala. So that would be really good. But what I was more focusing on was the actual supplementation. So when you the over-the-counter, the over-counter supplements. But fish is always good. Omega-3s are good for you. So
yeah. I mean, in flaxseed, because in that, for example, when you go to wherever they give you, mix it with water and give you that. So I think
flaxseeds are always, flaxseed. Yeah, some people do take that as a supplement too, but you're right. We even eat it in our diet anyway.
Yeah, or you can put it like in salad and stuff like that. So that helps with that. And then with fish, of course, it's like that. Yeah. But I mean, the tradition of fish eating in Eritrea is not as much as. Yeah, I think.
I just remember I ate them when I visited Massawa.
Yeah, I think eating fish, I think we have to work a lot on it. I mean, it's much better than before, but I think it's still, that should be we can introduce it like a school lunch program, that kind of, I mean, you got to put it in so that they can get, I don't know, have to talk about nutrition.
That is a good question. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, whatever, is needed in omega-3, whatever, and if it's not available, then you have to supplement it through different things like school lunch program, like that. They have different schools, different classes, then, I mean, that kind of stuff. I mean, so we have to be very creative into implementing these kind of things. Well, before that, when you were in university, or do you have mentors? Because we want, kids growing up to have mentors. So you'll be a mentor, for example, because you finished school, now you're in school, medical school. So, the next generation should look up to you and do that. So who were your mentors when you were at Stanford, or, before that in Boston, or,
Yes, I completely agree. Mentors are extremely, extremely important. They are, they're your guides. You know what I mean? They really help you as you go, giving you advice. And I was very fortunate to have a lot of mentors even ever since high school. Fortunately, I have a lot of cousins who were also in medicine and that are doctors, and they really helped guide me. Also, I connected a lot with my teachers. Again, I liked asking questions, so I would oftentimes bother them. You know, in hindsight, it might be kind of annoying. It sounds like I was kind of annoying them, but I would bother them asking questions even during their lunch break, and you know, just to learn more about.
So annoy them, right?
I think maybe maybe it was annoying them, but I think I mentioned actually during the talk in the Adel school that when I annoyed my biology teacher, I would a lot during lunch break. She actually talked about that in her letter of recommendation for me in college. So those moments are actually also important, to have those moments with your teachers, whatever moments they are, because they make, you know, they make your relationships with them more special and more meaningful in those ways. So yes, so I connected a lot with my biology teacher and also my college admissions counselor, Ms. Uris. I, I still talk to her to this day. I've texted her. She actually helped me with my medical school application too, even outside of high school. And she's come to my house. She's met my parents. You know, those relationships are important. So I had a lot of help in high school, and then in college as well. I also felt fortunate because I found mentors that were like me, Eritrean. You, for example, Iseas, and even Dr. Ida Haptetzion. I still talk to her as well. And I thought that was pretty special because I know it's not always the case, right? You know, we're not there yet in terms of numbers in levels like you and Dr. Haptetzion. So I felt very fortunate in that way, but it also in a way motivates me too, in me wanting to join you guys, so that, you know, in the future, younger people will see more of us there and have more options for mentors. And so, yes, so I also, you know, everywhere you go, you make relationships with people. For example, my freshman year, I met, we had teaching fellows. And so one of the teaching fellows, you know, it was just a class, right? 10 weeks in quarters system, right? In Stanford. But because I connected with her, you know, more than I think the other teaching fellows, I continued to email her afterwards just to check in with her, and continued our relationship all 4 years. And even afterwards, I would just email her here and there. And so I think with mentors, it's always good to stay connected. And also with mentors, it's good to take their advice, or you know, take their advice. And I think one thing my one mentor told me, Dr. Ida Haptetzion, she told me that you take advice, but in the end, it's your choice, right? So it's good to always have mentors, but it's also good to know it's your choice. So I think that's also important to note. You know, your path is yours. But I will say, for me, in my mind, the only way I can thank the mentors that I have is or the best way to thank them, I would say, is to continue by mentoring others after me. So I plan to do that. I'm doing that now as well, and plan to do that, you know, for the rest of my life, to mentor other students.
Yeah. So how are you doing that now? You said you're doing it now. You have like mentoring under you, or?
Yes. So, well, it's in the works right now, just because my first semester there was no way I could do anything else but study. But I will say also, after I graduated college, I started even then after graduating college, I started a program in the Boston Airstream community in Malden, Massachusetts, and I launched workshops, did monthly workshops to talk to students, high school students, about the college admissions process and financial aid as well, and just to provide a person to give advice if they needed it, and connected a lot with the high school students in that way. And then now, obviously, I'm in Michigan now, in medical school. So now I've been connecting with the students in the undergrad institution, being a part of the Student National Medical Association, or SNMA. It's an organization that is fostering community within underrepresented and minority medical students, and with undergraduate students interested in healthcare. And so in our program, SNMA, I'm launching a program or a organization in the undergrad community at Oakland University, along with my colleague, where we will get a community of my underrepresented minority students who are interested in medicine and in healthcare, and getting them connected to us, which connects them to the hospital, which means physician mentors and programs and opportunities. So that's in the works. I'm also connecting with this program in Detroit called Minds Matter Detroit. And it's it's an idea of having a direct mentorship with high school students, and guiding them to college, basically. And these students are often minority students, first generation, meaning they're the first ones in their family to go to college, like me. So I'm doing that as well. Now my second semester is a little bit more open, so I can do a little bit more.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad you mentioned Dr. Ida. As you know, she's been very wonderful, and she used to meet you every month, once a month, right? So
for breakfast.
For breakfast, yeah. That's, I mean, that might, because she's very busy now. She's even with, she's going to Pfizer.
I was able to catch her right before her
before she went.
Started.
Yeah. So yeah, you know, she is a wonderful person. Again, she helps a lot of people with mentoring and stuff. So I'm glad you mentioned her, and also for you to follow up on, you know, her footsteps and stuff like that, and to do that. And also you mentioned about the Eritrean community in Boston. I know your parents are very active there, but how did growing up in an Eritrean community, Eritrean family that's active in the Eritrean American community help you in molding what you become and what you want to become?
Yes, I actually talked a lot about that also in my applications, because it is also so.
It sounds like I read your article. It looks like I read your application, because
you already you're asking all the questions, all the correct questions.
I must have read it then, huh?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So yes, I grew up in the Eritrean community in Boston, in Malden, Mass. And my parents have always been very active in that community, which meant I was also very active in that community. I was there every weekend, was always, was in all the groups, all the youth groups, Hidri, YPFDJ, as I grew older, right? And being in there and being in that culture the culture of the community specifically, it was always service oriented. There was always, I would describe my family like that growing up, is service oriented. And so because of that, I knew I would be service oriented as well throughout my life. I knew I wanted to do something related to service, serving people, helping people. And then as I grew older, I figured out kind of what I wanted to do through my interests, where I realized I really liked life sciences. I mentioned my biology teacher. I really loved biology. And also at the same time, I also have to mention my cousins who were my mentors at the time, Dr. Luam Semere or Gahata Semere. They are also amazing and always answered my questions as well. And so I realized that medicine, right, because if biology, you can do a lot of things, different things. But I realized that medicine specifically was a great way it was kind of I called them the crossroads of service, and life sciences is medicine to me. And that's why I kind of decided to do it. And as I grew, in high school, I said it, but I didn't really know what it entailed. And going to Stanford, and I did have a lot of obstacles at Stanford too. I was a little unsure if I wanted to keep going and doing that, but it was, again, going back to my community and working with other communities similar to mine kept me going, to be honest, and made me realize I do want to do this, and I do want to be a doctor for a community like mine. That's honestly what kept me going.
So if you have an advice to give to middle and high school students, what would it be, And most importantly, and also how about to parents, advice to parents? Like he did the same thing he did in what would it be?
Okay, so for parents, I think the story I mentioned is a good piece of advice, which is that it doesn't mean you always have to it doesn't mean you always have to say no. It doesn't mean you always have to say yes. But what I'm to your kids, but what I'm saying is to always communicate, always keep talking with your kids. I think is really important. I'm not a parent. I've never been a parent, but I can say from the kids' perspective, it's always talking is always good because like the child, it can show you a different perspective, a different opinion, and show you also that it could also build trust as well, of that your child knows what they want and that they will go for it. So I always think talking to your kids, it's a good thing. That's what I would say for parents. For kids, I have a couple more. So one, I would say ask questions. Always ask questions to your parents, to your teachers, anybody you feel comfortable with or don't feel comfortable with even, just ask questions. I think the more you know, the better. Knowledge is the most powerful thing in the world to me, because it's the one thing no one can take from you, knowledge, right? So to me, always ask questions. Another thing, another more practical, more tangible thing, I guess, for high school students going into college, I think a big thing is to always know what resources you have available to you. Not just around you. You should always know who you can talk to, your support system, but also when you're in college, what type of tutoring programs, that are available to you, what type of advising programs, what, resources are available to you is really important. Again, if you don't know, it only hurts you, right? In the end, for me, I know I didn't realize tutoring was free for us until later on in my first year, and I really could have used it my first quarter. So I would say that is knowing what's available to you. And then the very last thing is to always believe in yourself. I think that's a big thing to remember, is that what's best for you, and you should always believe that you can do it. Sometimes you'll doubt yourself, especially in hard times. There always will be hard times. Maybe you fail a test, maybe another friends aren't, your friendships aren't going so well. Just try to bounce back from it, however way you can, and believe that you can push forward because you can. So those would be my pieces of advice. I hope they're helpful.
No, they're wonderful advices. Well, first of all, your parents are very fun,
They love you, Isam. They love you so much.
They're fun. So I met them when they came here. Is that for your graduation? And when I went to Boston for a conference, I went to your house.
Mm-hmm.
So they're very fun. So I can see that, what you mentioned already, all of that, I can see it. So it's you had a nice background coming up and so forth. So you can see that in your progress and all that.
Thank you.
So for this part, you don't have to answer it, or we don't if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. We'll cut it out. But the funny part that you mentioned was that that when you got the acceptance letter to Stanford or whatever, and you were happy about it and so forth, and your parents were, oh, good. Maybe 2 years later, they're like, you got to Stanford?
Yes.
you got accepted to Stanford? And we were like, she's at Stanford? I mean, that kind of stuff. And they were like, what?
Yes.
So I thought that was a funny story. I mean, we can cut this part out, but what do you think?
Yeah, I can say it. I don't know. Maybe I'll ask them. And then...
okay, ask them, and then if they say fine, then we'll put it. On the serious side, the reason is that, like you said, the first generation who are growing up here to go to school, right?
Mm-hmm.
Really, they have to depend on themselves, because if their parents are not aware of the school system, or about all of that, so the kids are literally left on their own, and also to talk to the counselors and stuff like that, and figure out, which one is the best school, or which one is a good school, or which one is, any school. What are the things you need and all that. So, and then the competition, they may not see that, right? So how do the kids who try to, be here and also be in the situation that they're in, they have to compete, they have to get to this and that, do that. You see, for them, if they're the support, not necessarily they don't get it from the parents, but if the parents, didn't go to school themselves, or how would so I want to see how that would help with the students to be able to look for something like the mentorship you were talking about, or the tutors you were talking about, or the different places like the MIT has the summer program, and there are a lot of them like that. How would they know to do that? I mean, first of all, you mentioned that they have to ask questions, but for them to ask questions, they have to have some background. You just don't ask I mean, you can ask any question you want, but at least you have to have something to ask. So how do you connect those? I mean, that's the point. That story helps in addressing this. That makes sense? No?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I understand. Hopefully I can answer it the way hopefully I can answer it. So because it is hard to answer, to be honest, but I do know one thing. So, okay, so I will give the background story that Isyas is mentioning, which is, it is a funny story. So I got into Stanford. I've told them that I applied and I got into Stanford, and I read the acceptance letter when I was in school. Actually, I was in school late, and I read it with my college admissions counselor, the same one that I've kept in contact with this whole time, and she was so excited that I got in, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, you have to call your parents, put them on speakerphone. I want them to, I want to hear their reaction." And so I was like, okay, but I kind of knew, I didn't know if it was, how it was gonna work out. So I called them. I called my mom first, or my dad. I ended up calling my mom, I think. And I put her on speakerphone, and I said, "Guess what? I got into Stanford." And my mom's response was, "Oh, okay. So are you coming home?" And that was it. and my teacher, she took care of it very well. She was like, "She's just in shock. She's just in shock." I was like, "Yes, I think she was." But I knew the reason why was that it is, I think, the biggest thing, and God bless my parents, they never wanted to show it to me at the time, but they were just worried. It was across the country, and it was far. I was the first person in my family, to do that, and so it was far. I'm the first, their first daughter leaving, their first child. So I think it was, it was a little worrisome. And it actually wasn't until after a little while that I realized my cousins, the ones that were advocating for me this whole time, they also called them, my parents, and said, "You have to let her go. You have to let her go." And so I was able to go, and this whole time, and again, I say, bless my parents, because this whole time I didn't, they'd never told me, don't go.
Yeah.
They I was able to go, and on my own, and I pushed myself to go. That, is what I'm trying to say. But I agree with you that it is tough, because even afterwards, I was like, "You're never going to do that again."
Yeah, I know it's tough, for the parents.
It's tough.
And then the one you're talking about, the letting go, is that for school. So,
yeah. But I do say, to answer your second question, which, by the way, I realized I interrupted you. Did you want to say something?
Oh, no, go ahead.
I will say the one thing I do think my parents did really well is that they did know that, well, I'm the first person to go to college, the first person in my direct family, right? I had my cousins, but my direct family to pursue medicine. And so I think my parents knew, they knew that. And I think what they did well was that they allowed me to explore and allowed me to find other teachers to talk with, and so, for example, with that counselor that I really got close with, she actually talked about that, and she really appreciated that with my parents, about how they let her guide me fully. She talked about how other parents that sometimes know more about college will butt in and will put their own opinions in it, and it made her her job kind of difficult, but she said she really appreciated that my parents, you know, really trusted her and trusted me as well, to be honest, to get where I wanted to go or where I wanted to be. So I really do appreciate that about my parents, is that they didn't say no. You know, obviously they were worried, but they never held me back. So I really appreciate that about my parents.
Yeah, so they gave you the space, even though the war is there, but they
exactly.
Gave space.
They still gave me the space.
Yeah, I think that's the main point. I mean, as parents would always be worried whether you're close by, next door, or whether you're 3,000 miles away, but still giving that space is the most important thing. And I think you mentioned that over and over again many times when it came to the adult technical school. So you've written 3 successful applications, right? The MIT one, MITE's application, the Stanford application, now the medical school application. So do you have any advice to students on how to handle the essays? I mean, what are the kind of things from the 3 places that you mentioned? What were the key hooks that you think was very important? I mean, you are not in the admission committee or anything like that, but I mean, what are they looking for, and what advice do you have for students, to return students who want to apply to different schools, or any school for that matter, medical school, or the summer program you talked about?
Yes, I've written many more applications out of those 3, and a lot of them were not that great, to be honest, and I've learned from them as well. I think a big misconception is that for applications that I've heard time and time again from students is that you need to always have a big, giant, amazing story. I had this huge accident, and I learned so much from this, and
dramatic something.
Exactly, a very dramatic story, and that's not always the case. I mean, for some people do have those stories, and that's why they came to whatever program. If we say medicine, sometimes they did have a big altercation, involving the hospital or involving medicine in some way, and that's why they decided to do it. Me personally, I never broke a bone. I never had those stories myself. But what I'm trying to say is the key is knowing your story, whatever it is unique, right? You're the only person who experienced it the way you experienced it. And so the goal is to convey that that unique part of your story to the admissions committee. The whole point of admissions committees, right, is you want to catch their eye. And yes, those big stories might be really bright and shiny, but your story will also be shiny too if you show how unique it is. And what else is another good? I had another point that I wanted to talk about. Oh yes, another point is, if you do, so like I mentioned, I did have some setbacks in Stanford, and academic setbacks. And at first I didn't know if I could apply, if they would even want to look at my application with these setbacks. But my admissions counselor, or my college counselor, advised me. She said, no, you need to put those in there because you've done the work. Well, I should provide some background. So after those academic setbacks, I went back and took those classes again, and I got them back where I needed to be. And I also learned how to be a stronger student during that time. And so she said, you need to put that in your application to show, yes, you had this setback, but it actually made you even stronger afterwards. And so I would say, for people who may have had some fallbacks, first of all, it's not the end of the world. There are options, there are ways to still get to where you need to be. you hear plenty of stories in the medical school field, where people say, they had a below average GPA or an average GPA and still got in. So it's not the end of the world. And also, you shouldn't hide from those setbacks that you might have had. You should actually show how you bounced back from them, right? How it made you a stronger student, how it made you even more prepared to be a medical student or to be whatever you want to be. So that would be another piece of advice I would give.
Yeah. I mean, in order to get up, you have to fall.
Exactly.
Right? So, so I don't think it should be the end of the world and, decide I'm through it with this and stuff like that. But the idea is that they want to see how you progress. For example, if you had a low grade on this one, but then time you took the same one, and you got, better grade, and then after that because it takes, so even for sometimes falling down is a wake up call, and like you might think, I got it, whatever, and then so there's a lot of dynamics going on, but. So the worry parents usually have is like financing for higher education, right? Especially with top schools like Stanford, the cost of attendance is very high. And to get your degree for 4 years is. So if parents are worried about the cost of rising, tuition and with that food and and dorm and all that. So how would, do you have any advice how to soothe parents' worry? Or for example, is there any advice that you give parents?
Yes.
Stanford or any school.
Well, I will say out of the schools that I applied to, Stanford was my best financial aid package. So I would say that for even though Stanford definitely has a high price tag, it also has a lot of money. So, and a lot of other, more prestigious schools are in the same boat. So I would say for parents, don't deter your kids from applying to those types of schools because they might actually give you a lot of money. Even others, I've heard they get full scholarships, but it's those types of schools that have the money to do that. So, and again, yes, they're competitive, but why not? You should just go for it and see, just make sure you prepare for the application, right? But in other ways, right? Some students might not want to apply to those schools, and that's fine as well. And then I would fall back again about the resources that we have. And from the parents' perspective, so the thing, unfortunately, unfortunately for the parents, maybe it is in the kids' hands a lot of the times because the students need to find scholarships that they can apply to, or that's an option that they have. And so from the parents' perspective, I would say to keep communicating with their children, their students, to see, what they're doing in terms of scholarships. It is tough, I would say. But there are options. I think the tough part too with financing and with the parents is that a lot of it does fall on the children, on the students. For example, the student loans is going to be under the students' names. And so that causes a lot of worries, I would say, for the parents. But my best advice is to always know the resources, meaning in this case, the scholarships that are available, the grants that are available, the different types of loans as well. And the parents should be looped into, right, and be talking to them, making sure to hold their students accountable for applying to those loans and to those scholarships. again, with scholarships, always just go for it. There's the worst they can say is no. And there is a lot of free money around. They just have, you just have to look for it. Unfortunately, it doesn't fall on your lap, unfortunately. So that would be my best advice. It is really difficult though. I wish I had better advice.
Yeah, but one of the things, though, do you think it's a good idea to have the local Eritrean communities, those who went to school or who live around that area, go do this or prepare like a college application week or something like that, or have it in a national level where, now, like, what do you think, which one would be more effective? Just the local, local chapters or whatever, or would it be advisable to do it, like in a package thing, having like list of all the resources from each area, and then each area would take like the resources from there, whatever is applicable to there. Like, for example, have a national Eritrean information center for high school students entering colleges, and all these are, available, the application deadline, the resources and so forth. And for example, people in the Boston area would take whatever applies in Massachusetts, or the ones in California would do that. You think that something like that would work? Or let everybody do their own thing?
I mean, if there is a possibility, I know there's one which I should double check if I could maybe email you again just to make sure I know. It's called the Eritrean Diaspora Network, I think, EDN. I know they provide scholarships, annual scholarships to students, Eritrean students that apply to their programs. So in that case, it's kind of, I think that's like what you're talking about, but on a much smaller scale, and maybe not connected to a national organization. I mean, I think anything is better than going, just letting people do their own thing, because some people unfortunately are not able to offer that, right? And that's not that shouldn't be, I always think money should not be the reason why somebody shouldn't go to school or isn't able to go to school. But unfortunately, in a lot of cases, it is true that it ends up being that. So if there is a way to have a system where money can be allocated to students who are trying to go to school but can't because they're not financially able to, I think that's a great idea. In terms of either the national or the local, I think it depends. That's really hard to say too. Certain local chapters maybe need more, maybe, than others. I think that's really hard to say, unfortunately. I need to research it more myself.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah. But the reason I'm asking that is, for example, I don't know how in the Boston area, like when we graduated, usually here in this area, what they do is, for example, during the Eritrean Independence Day or week or that celebration that they had, or have, they announce the number of students going into college, or the number of students who graduated from high school, from universities, ones who graduated from graduate school and stuff like that. So, having the number of people, I mean, Eritrean community compared to other community like Nigerians or Ethiopians or Iranians or some Persians or something like that is very small compared to them relatively. But when we compare to the number of Eritrean graduates, the number of Eritrean graduates, compare it with our numbers, I think it's high. But we don't have the specific numbers. For example, I did a 3 years comparison, I think 1995, 96, and 97. And then the gap between the boys and, men and women was like not very big. The number of disciplines that they were taking was many, not limited to what you were talking about in engineering or doctor or science, whatever. But this was like, I think there were like 36 different disciplines within these 3 different years. So the gap, so I got that number, but I don't think it would be good idea to keep all this, each area is doing that, and then we can see the number, or, it helps us with a lot of different things. Is there a big gap between Eritrean, women and Eritrean men, Eritrean boys and Eritrean girls? How big is the difference? In order to do that, what we need to do is find out this number. So again, like I said, the 3 numbers, which the number is comparatively is high, but that doesn't mean it's true that, and Dahai, they used to send, for example, so-and-so is graduating from high school, so-and-so graduating, bachelor's in science and psychology, or in engineering or geology or computer science or history or something like that. So unless they send it, we wouldn't know, right? But from just the ones who send that doesn't mean that only the ones who send it to Dahai, for example, were the ones who graduated, but there were others who didn't send to Dahai, but also graduated. So the number, those 3 years showed good numbers, but we need to keep those numbers. So if we have something like that, then that would be sent to all the Eritrean communities and whatever. They can see the number of people, with how many people we are here, the number of people, 2nd generation, 3rd generation. So now we've gotten to, from the first Eritreans who got here, you can say that generation is 4th generation, but mostly it's 2, 3 generations, in a lot of them. So we've gotten to 3rd generation now. So in order to do that, I think we need these kind of numbers. So that's how, so we need to be thinking strategically about these things. And that, I think, the basis of getting the data would help us to concentrate on which areas like weaker, and why is that, and that kind of stuff. So it helps us with a lot of sociological issues and stuff like that. So I think
that's a great idea. And I would say, at least from my experience, the interest would be high to me, because even in the Boston community, every year we had a graduation ceremony for all of the students graduating from high school. It was a very big celebration. And it was really helpful and support. Like, it showed a lot of support within the community for the students. And so clearly graduating and education in general is really important in our community. So I'm sure they would be really interested in hearing or learning, in participating, or, in your idea. I think it's a great idea.
I think we need to look more into that and get data from all of them. I know from here, it's like every year, there are about 20 or so times 10 years. So just area will be just 200.
Wow.
So, but from that, how do you follow and all that? So what I did from those 3 years, I think there were 320, if I'm not mistaken, for 3 years. And then, some of them were already, like the 95 were like a couple of 5 doctors or something like that, and maybe 20, 25 masters, and the rest were. And then I took the ones from, for example, who took a bachelor's degree, because if you're a PhD already, how you can, we can go into your profession and all that, but for the younger kids to look into, the process. And then the majority were undergraduate. So I went and, tried to follow, took the names and put it in LinkedIn. And then some of them already graduated, and some of them were professors, some of them were entrepreneurs and stuff like that, even from that small data. So I would argue the number is high, but we need to, follow up with that. So I think, if we start doing that, and and so forth. I think that would be helpful. And then in not only being able to move academically, but also economically. I mean, we need to, so if we're a third generation, I mean, we need to start to think in terms of our economic impact in this country and economic power. So I think this kind of things helps us because it's all intertwined. So I think we need to think in terms of that. So finally, so you're in medical school. What are you studying? What are you planning to do once you finish, or is it too early?
Kind of. I came in, well, I started in college thinking absolutely neuroscience, that's what I want to do. And then it changed to, as I started working with different clinics and like community health centers in particular, I'm more interested now in primary care. But again, primary care is kind of an umbrella term. I can do a lot in primary care, family medicine, pediatrics, even, OB-GYN, women's health. Are all options. So I'm not sure. And then I can go in my third year and love surgery or love, other specialties. So I'm keeping my mind open. I'm gonna wait until third year until I've learned everything and then see.
So you have to decide by third year.
Well, I guess the good thing how medical school is structured, or most medical schools are structured, is your first 2 years, you're called your preclinical years. And so you're learning, it's almost like college again, but more advanced in a way. And so you're learning all about everything medicine, and you're in the books most of the time. And then you finish your second year, you go into your third. And then that's when you're in the hospital. So those are your clinical years, and that's when you rotate into the different specialties. And so third year is a critical time because you're gonna be in the, in the hospital, learning, in those rotations, learning about those different specialties while working there. You are helping, you're a part of the team at those times. And so during that year, you start to know what specialties you like and don't like, so that by the time your fourth year, you're applying to residency, you know what specialty you want to apply to, what residency specialty you want to apply to.
So finally, you're still bothering your medical school professors then, huh? You're still bugging them. So you just have to ask questions and keep doing that. And so Adel, I really would like to thank you for your time, especially now you're in medical school. It's good to reconnect with you. Say hello to your family. And we'll talk again. So in a couple, we'll keep in touch with you and see the progress. And we like to see more articles and stuff like that, and so forth.
I would love that. Thank you so much for reconnecting with me as well. Thank you so much, Gideon. And yes, I will continue writing, continue talking with you. I will send you those, as they come. So.
Okay, and pictures that would go with this.
Yes, I'll try my best. I'll find.
Whatever pictures you have, and we have some here. We can add into that. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you, Adel.
Thank you.